Book report. It's a book report. It's a book report about a movie. 'Cause that makes sense. So, I think I want to take drugs with Gaspar Noé. I think that's how I want to start this.
Yeah? Would he be like one of those people at the table if like, you could have dinner with someone from history like Gandhi, Hitler, all those people? Would he be someone like if you had to choose someone to do a bunch of drugs with?
Well, I've only seen this film now, but it was quite compelling. I think like anyone from history to take drugs with, though, that's a wide open table right there, because it's gonna take a lot for you to compete with Hunter S. Thompson or like Jim Morrison. I think those would be like
Leonardo da Vinci.
Da Vinci?
Just slip some acid into his wine or something, into his grappa.
We'd barely speak the same language. I don't know if I could like keep up with Da Vinci on an intellectual level on psychedelics. Let's just say LSD.
It'd be hilarious
Hunter would
though,
be fun
if he was only like that for a few weeks out of the year. If like Da Vinci was just like a slovenly piece of shit for the whole year, and then like every 2 weeks he just was a miraculous conduit of genius energy or something.
Maybe he had to take that was his 2 weeks on the analog, the LSD analog that they had back then. What would that be?
I don't know. Maybe he found like a button of mescaline on his travels through Persia or some shit. Some weird Chinese tea.
Yeah, he just figured out like mescaline before it was cool, before it was popularized. I don't know. But today, we're talking about a film by Gaspar Noé. And one of the reasons he's maybe not up there is this is the only film of his that I've seen. You have been talking to me about him for a while now, though. Especially when we talk about like just weird movies. You're always like, Gaspar Noé. So you had said that I should see a Gaspar Noé film. And I looked through his filmography, and this is the one that I chose. Not realizing exactly that it would be so kind of similar to what we did last week, because last week we did High Life, which was an abstract, uncomfortable, psychosexual film about sex and death at the edge of the void from a French director, right? Do you think that's like a fair assessment of that? So we go from that to an abstract, uncomfortable, psychosexual film about sex and death at the edge of the void from an Argentinian director who just grew up in France. So huge difference.
Just an ocean. Just a few buckets of salt water called the Atlantic.
Well, yeah, he did grow up in France though, so maybe there's something to that. You can also attribute him to French cinema, and I don't know. This film was very pornographic. It was very wild. We're just going to assume that you've seen it if you're watching this, but if you haven't, I think I'd give the same caveat as I gave last time. Like, if you're okay with a really slow, really weird movie that pushes boundaries and will make you uncomfortable, then I think you should see Enter the Void.
Definitely. I mean, you should see his entire catalog if that's your thing. He hasn't done this either without some pretty heavy and marked controversy. He's got a film called Irreversible that I like the way when you talk about films that are like irredeemable. You talk about films that are, I don't know, just mean-spirited. That one is probably the one I would point to if I was going to level that type of criticism at him. However, I liked it in its weird, edgy, angsty way. I don't know how do I say this? I don't know how,
You don't have Jeff to bail you out here.
I know. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I don't know how popular he is among cinephiles and other critics in the United States, but I know that he's made like quite a splash in Europe. And the reason that I was bringing him up and I pushed him, I mean, I've brought him up well before in our friendship, but I pushed him a little more when you started talking about Lars von Trier, right? Because I was like, there's almost like no way that you could get through Lars von Trier's filmography without at one point brushing up with Noé. It's like this German-French connection, right? And I mean, that's not the connection. Let's just say they're European and that is a connection. The connection is the films that they make.
The connection is definitely I don't know. Yeah, visceral is a good word. They're definitely both operating on this level of trying to shock you in a sense, and having like shock art be part of what they're doing. Pushing especially like sexual boundaries. I can speak to Von Trier better than I can to Noé because I've only seen this film.
Okay. Lots of violence as well.
Lots of violence, incredibly sexually explicit as well. And I don't know. So he has a quote that I found that was really interesting, apropos the way that he approaches like sexuality. He says, "There is no line between art and pornography. You can make art of anything. You can make an experimental movie with that candle or with this tape recorder. You can make a piece of art with a cat drinking milk. You can make a piece of art with people having sex. There is no line. Anything that is shot or reproduced in an unusual way is considered artistic or experimental." And I really like this quote because it speaks to something that I've spoken about numerous times on this show, where it's like if your film doesn't have any of those Spielbergian like movie elements, people are gonna think it's weird.
Yeah.
And he actually considered, I was watching some interviews with him, he actually considered Into the Void like a what's the word? Like a commercial film.
Ah.
Which is a wild attribution. So I don't know how that compares to his other movies. But one thing I will say is that movie you were just talking about as well. What's it called? The one he did before this? Irreversible. I purposefully did not choose that one because I heard that there was like a 12-minute gratuitous anal rape scene.
Yeah.
And that was like, that speaks to your point about him being kind of a shockmeister in that Von Trier kind of way, where it's like, okay, how much of you is doing this because you think it's legitimate art that is saying something, and how much are you just trying to get a rise out of people?
Yeah.
And the interesting part about Gaspar and Von Trier and people like that is the borderline, because you don't like, where's that border? Like, is a 12-minute anal rape scene art? If it elicits something like really crazy within you, who's to say? Who's to say where the value in that is?
Yeah. No, definitely. And it's hard because they make it hard. Von Trier and Noé make it hard as directors to analyze their films just like normally, because we have to talk about the shock jock kind of value to it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What makes him different than someone like Howard Stern? I mean, I'm not comparing them to Howard Stern, but you get what I'm going for, right? Are they just gimmicks? Or are they like, are they the caricature of the artist, you know, that's just so French, so you know, just
right.
like avant-garde, like this is art.
We put in all the sex, all the baguettes, everything, sex is good.
Exactly. Right. Just sucking back on all their cigarettes and shit.
See, but this movie didn't shock me, and maybe that's because I'm just like, I've seen what I've seen, especially in the last few months, man. I saw High Life, I've seen Antichrist again, I saw Titan, which is a wild fucking psychosexual horror death sex thing, once again by a French director. Jesus Christ, France.
I know, seriously.
Sensing a theme here. But this one was more, I mean, it did have all those sexual elements, but like people having sex, it's like, whatever, that's fine. Like I've seen porn before. You know?
Yeah.
Having it in a movie is not that crazy to me. It's just not. If it's like operating within telling a story. And that's where we can start talking about Enter the Void, right?
Yeah, well, at least I will say the sex in this film, while it is heavy and large portions, large healthful servings of sex, it's not like, I don't want to use the word gratuitous in a negative sense. It does serve the plot as strange and as present as it is, but it's I don't know. It's not bad. It doesn't offend me in any way, and I don't think that, like, if you compared this to Irreversible is what I'm saying, you could definitely see how this one is a much softer tone when it presents the theme of sex.
Yeah, nothing like impacted me on the sexual level quite like Willem Dafoe ejaculating blood in Antichrist.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe some stuff in, well, there is an abortion scene in this movie.
Yeah.
By the way, and it's pretty intense. It doesn't do the whole thing, but you see the beginning of it, and you see the fucking bloody aftermath of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't pull punches in that regard. I feel like I was gonna make a point with that, but I trailed off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like all of his movies, his entire filmography, along with Von Trier, is just like massive, like trigger warning label, right? If we're gonna use the parlance of our times.
Yeah, massive trigger warning for violence, trauma, of course, explicit sexual activities. If that kind of thing makes you uncomfortable. Or if you don't want to see an abortion, then maybe it's not the movie for you.
Yeah.
Also, really strong epilepsy warning. I was not ready for how fucking epileptic this movie was, Alex.
Are you talking about when he's like blinking?
I'm talking about a lot of things.
So we can establish that this movie's strange in the sense that it's all first person.
Yeah, it's the only movie that I think I've ever seen where the point of view is from a human soul, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's what it is. It literally, like...
Yeah. The main actor is barely in the film.
I know.
You see the back of his head more than you see the front. There's like moments 2 hours in where I was like, I forgot what this guy looks like.
Yeah.
So before we get into the plot, I am curious, when did you first see this movie? Like, how did you get turned on to Gaspar?
I'm glad you asked me this because I had a story ready. First, I have to give a shout out to a friend, long lost friend. I think he's getting married now. I don't know where he is, but whatever. Dustin, wherever you are. There was a time where me and my buddy Dustin we had nothing to do. We had nothing to show for life. Just out of high school. Played Rush all the time on his Nintendo. Just got high. Just hung out at his apartment in Fullerton. He loved movies, and I would come over and he'd always be watching a movie. I saw Straw Dogs for the first time, the original with Dustin Hoffman in it, and like after that I would just come over all the time and we'd just watch movies. He showed me Noe, and first it was Irreversible, and I was like, this movie is like disgusting.
Wow, so he threw you into the deep end, basically.
Yeah, but it's different when you're young and like barely 21, 22. I don't know. It just feels different when you watch movies like that. You feel like you're unwrapping something forbidden, and you're like, you step outside of the lane of mainstream Hollywood film. You get even further out of the lane than films like P.T. Anderson and Quentin Tarantino, who have themselves been more brought into the mainstream of Hollywood.
Oh, no. You're going weird mode here. Yeah, this is like really outside the box.
Oh, what do you mean?
I mean, in terms of films. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. No, like it's like you're like steering well clear of like, you're in almost like a desolate place populated with very few people who would have seen this film.
I miss that feeling. I do get it sometimes, though.
You say you miss that feeling?
Yeah, that feeling of like I don't know, almost like breaking your cherry in terms of cinematic weirdness. Like, I was thinking about it too. It's funny that you framed it this way. Mandy was great. I think I like that movie in a few ways. We'll have to talk about Mandy at some point. Definitely. But one of the thoughts I had is like, I wish I knew about this movie when it came out, because that would have been the perfect time for me and my friends to take acid and watch it, or take mushrooms and watch it, because we would do that around that time, like
Right.
a little post high school. We would watch like Pi a lot, Pi from the first film from Aronofsky, some like splatter movies and stuff, but yeah,
Holy drug
Mountain.
use too is a huge theme. I'll say in this film as well. I don't know if we mentioned that, but
We have not mentioned that. Drug use features heavily in both this film and in Gaspar Noé's life and philosophy. I was watching an interview with him just before this, actually. He was talking about, he's like, some of the greatest moments of my life are on drugs. Like, if you haven't done drugs, and I know some people in the room haven't, well, you should be sad about that. You should be ashamed or something like that. I'm not saying those are exact words, but the general message. Not that you could tell by watching his movie that he likes drugs, you know?
Yeah.
It's a fucking wild one.
I mean, so I guess it wasn't necessarily... It's different than a recommendation, more of a suggestion that you should watch it. But what did you think about it?
I thought it was incredibly interesting. I think this goes back to what I was saying about sort of missing the innocence, is that it didn't shock me or go too weird, because I think I'm just like my weird meter has been broken.
Hey, that's what we do here, right?
That's what we do, man, here in the Reel Weirdos. But I thought it was really good. I thought, okay, so it starts off, and I knew generally what to expect, kind of, right? I knew the synopsis, which is that a drug dealer in Tokyo dies, and then his soul wanders around and has to, figure something out, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what I knew. So the movie starts, a lot of visual abstractions when he smokes DMT. It has these really long, gorgeous, hallucinatory moments where the movie wants you to be on drugs when you watch it, by the way.
Definitely.
It definitely does, and I wasn't. Although I did pause it 10 minutes in, and I ate an edible. I was like, I'll go with you to some of the way here. So I was like, 3 hours. 3 hours of this. Well, I better strap in and strap on in some capacity. And then he meets up with his friend Alex, and they're talking about the Book of the Dead, right? And he's having that conversation where he tells you what happens when you die and how you'll be drawn to all these lights. And if you can't transcend, this is the big key. If you can't transcend, then all of your trauma and all the fears in your soul are going to be manifest as your reality. And I was like, okay, he's telling me what's going to happen in the film. I'm in. This sounds awesome. And then it did. He dies.
Yeah.
Spoilers. He's a drug dealer. He dies. And then he goes into the spirit world, where he's going in and out of the experiences of his sister who lives with him. And they have a weird relationship as well.
Linda.
And he's also flitting through temporality. And then there were moments later on where I was like, what the hell is happening?
Oh, yeah.
And then I had to think back, and I was like, oh, this is maybe his spirit, manifesting reality. It's it becomes borderline, where it's hard to translate.
Yeah, so it's exactly like you said, how the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's before you can reincarnate, right? If you don't transcend the first time, you have to experience or relive your traumas. So obviously our main character dies at towards the beginning of the film ish story,
right?
And so you get this I don't want to say you don't go purely backwards, you don't purely rewind. It's a rewind, but in a insanely, like you said, variable way when it comes to temporality and things like that. Sometimes you're with Oscar, who's the main character, you're with his parents when they're meeting and they're beginning their relationship, and then you see the aftermath also. It does it goes in reverse for Oscar and his experiences, but it still does follow the timeline, right? You see the aftermath of the craziness.
Yeah, it's like a it's like a 3-act structure, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
The first act is very short. It sets up what the philosophy of the film is, so you really want to pay attention to that, because otherwise you might be horribly confused later. And then you're right. I had kind of forgotten that it goes into the past, and it sets up like the whole dynamic of he and his sister and the trauma of their parents' car crash, which, by the way, there are some moments when that crash comes in, I was not expecting it.
Oh, really?
And it just blasted me in the face.
Oh,
I was like, boom, like rocked back in my chair. But I was high too, and I don't usually get high.
Nice.
And then it does, it goes into like what happens after he dies and follows, and he just floats around, and sometimes you're not thinking about the fact that you are looking through his soul's eyes, because he doesn't have agency.
No,
right?
Not at all. Not like a normal narrative protagonist or character would. He's dead, people. He's straight up dead. This is literally, like Jesse said, his soul floating around kind of in the void.
In the void. Yeah, on the edge of the void here. Yeah, you get really wild stuff like when he enters the eyes, like he can enter people's eyes, see through their eyes. And he enters into Mario, the Japanese guy who owns the club that his sister does stripping at, while he's fucking his sister. So it's basically him fucking his sister. And there is a really weird sexual charge between him and his sister. That's really interesting. That pays off at the end in a wild way.
I was going to say, he gets real intimate, just not in the way that you guys think, if you're listening, with his sister.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I was going to say, though, the only other film that I've seen kind of do this like point of view thing and play around with like what it would feel like to be in someone else's body that's interacting with people within your social circle.
Being John Malkovich?
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
Like, the first time I watched this movie, I had that feeling. The second time, though, definitely, I was like, man, I got to tell Jesse about this. And I'm sure you thought the same thing at one point.
You know what? I didn't. The only time I thought about that is my brain making snap connections when you just said that. Okay, and I was like, it has to be that, right? That's the only one I could think of.
A little quirky movie in its own right, but not quite as visually exuberant.
No. Exuberant is one way to put it. The filmmaking here is really unusual and interesting.
Oh,
it's always going through walls. It's floating above people a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. It's moving in very non-traditional ways. A lot of swirling motions, like just around and around. Very rarely will you get like a movie shot.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like wispy, like a soul.
It is wispy, like a soul. It also plays with color in really wild ways.
Yes. I mean, I was going to say Tokyo, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a brilliant idea to have this movie take place in Tokyo, right?
There's a review or something that mentions like it's like a glut of the neon gaudiness of Tokyo, and I was like, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, Tokyo is almost like another character. It's like the character that envelops all other characters. It's such a unique space, such a unique place. Especially when you have Gaspar Noé's visual style, which is in and of itself like full of gaudy neons and like flashing lights.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, so there's that element.
There definitely has to be maybe an epilepsy warning. Maybe we should put one, I guess. I guess you already said it, but yeah, this film is like very visually striking, but not just in the way that you think where it's like hues and vibrance like that. It's like it flashes at you, you know, like it almost hurts your eyeballs a little bit.
There were moments when he died was one of them, and it comes back a couple times where it's just like white. The screen is white and it's flashing very quickly at me. And I texted you. I was like, I have to shut my eyes when he dies. It was like it's epilepsy incarnate. Luckily, I will say those moments are like localized, right? It'll happen for like a solid minute to 2 minutes, and then it'll be gone, and it won't do it for an hour. So you can kind of like figure out when it's happening and just like, I don't know, go look at your poetry book or something. That's what the kids look at these days, right?
Yeah.
They read their
TikTok poetry.
TikTok poetry. Yeah, where are we at? Filmmaking. I was going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I was curious, like, is this indicative of his style in general, or is this a departure?
So this one is, I mean, this is kind of like his style in general as far as thematic elements go, but stylistically, this is the most like turned up movie I've seen him do, because it involves like the use and the, I don't know, how do you say this? It centers around hallucinogenic drugs and DMT and, you know, really, really potent, like visual inducing, sensory, like changing drugs. So he really tries to, like, I don't want to say it's like he tries to put a drug trip on film, right? Because everyone tries to do that, and everyone has their own different styles and how they show a character is inebriated. And there are a lot of cool and clever film techniques to do that. But this film takes the theme of drug dealers and psychedelics and hallucinogenics and just like stretches it out over visually over the entire film. So it's different in that sense. There are moments that are, I want to say it's much like slower than Irreversible is.
Okay.
So Irreversible's a little bit faster, but plays with time kind of in the same way. But it
has more traditional photography, right?
Yes.
It's not point of view, so you have that sort of like omniscient narrator of a camera.
Exactly. It's like there's so much motion blur, right, in this, and like what is the term? Depth
of field.
Yes. And like
it's really shallow depth of field and focus. Yeah, focus. A lot of out of focus. He spoke about that actually, not that, but the drug part in an interview. I'll try to paraphrase, where he was saying that like a lot of the visual representations of drug trips in cinematic history are garbage. They're like really badly done, and I completely agree. Really? And I think he did a really great job in this movie of making it feel like a drug trip and like doing that visually. Do you disagree?
I do disagree, I would say, with that they're always crappy.
I wouldn't say always. Often.
Often, okay. So they are often crappy, but I don't know. There are some that are like, I guess I'm proving your point in saying that when you see a good one, it sticks out. You know, maybe because it's so rare. So I'm thinking of all the clever and good ones that I've seen before.
What are the great cinematic drug trips? We have Fear and Loathing has some great ones, of course.
Oh.
Goddamn Reptile Zoo.
Slicing onion or slicing grapefruits, right? And like while the Vietnam War is just blasting all over the walls. Like, I love that scene.
We did Scanner Darkly recently that has some good ones.
Yeah. This one's gonna sound kind of cheesy, but I liked Garden States. I like when Zach Braff took some like ecstasy at the party.
I have no memory of that film, so I cannot comment.
There's
I think like it's a different thing, right, to have a character on a drug and have the movie be on a drug.
Oh no,
you know
so
what I
like
mean?
It speeds up. Like the movie plays in an effect. It's a totally normal straight cut like movie. And then when he takes the drugs, it like blurs and speeds time up and things like that.
Cuz one of the things I hate most in cinema is when people who clearly don't know about drugs try to do drugs. And they're like, oh, man. Oh, it's so trippy, man. What, dude? And you're like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever sounded like that I know of.
No, even the Alice in Wonderland shit, like, I'm with you. I agree with you and Noe in that sense. But no, I think it was really well done. I mean, and you could tell that, like, with this film, he was probably just itching to be like, no, this is how it is supposed to look, right? Like, this is how it's supposed to look on film, and this is what we're going to do. So he just obsessed over that, probably. But there's this critic that I wanted to quote.
Yeah.
That says, if Lost in Translation is the film you'd make when all you know about Japan are the pampered press junkets and Shinjuku 5-star hotels, then Enter the Void is what you would make if you never got beyond the Roppongi pub crawl. And I feel like that's a good way to describe this film. But because of Gaspar Noé's, like, filmmaking, it doesn't feel like as seedy as a pub crawl. There's something elevated to the film.
It feels dreamlike.
Yeah, like
the whole movie's like a strange dream.
It's not like Train Spotting or like Candy, or like, it doesn't try to show like I mean, it does. It shows some grittiness to the drug world and the underbelly, but I don't feel like it's ever making like an overarching thematic moral message about drugs or about like the way you should live your life or things like that. It's very philosophical and focused on this like idea of death and like experience of the afterlife.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of Gaspar's sort of philosophy in terms of drug use, like I espoused to you earlier, through the main character when he's like, whatever, it's a drug, just take it, it's fine. I feel like there's a little bit of that, but I agree with you that it's definitely not the focus of the film, nor is like it's not intending to be about that. It is more obsessed with how trauma affects people and just this wild idea of reincarnation and how, I don't know, like how a soul deals with its death and inability to cope.
Yeah, it's a drama, right? Like you would call it, it's like a drama.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is that almost all of the dialogue was improvised.
Oh.
Gaspar at the time did not understand English very well, and he told the actors to improvise.
Really?
So it's like, I guess it's kind of an like a Terrence Malick vein there, where he tells you what the scene is and like what emotions to do, and then just lets you play around and probably uses what he wants later. I'm not entirely certain.
That's really interesting.
It is really interesting because there's some really pointed dialogue about how we'll never leave each other. The two main characters after the accident, the brother and sister. What are their names? Oscar and Linda?
Linda.
Yeah. Yeah, we could talk about Linda too. She's wild. She's interesting.
Yeah. She is definitely like I don't know how to describe her.
She's like, I thought of Amy Adams in not Inherent Vice. What's The Master? Where it's like, I feel like somehow secretly this is the most important character and I can't exactly say why.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, she's a fulcrum for a lot of the stuff that surrounds Oscar's being, I guess, and what we know about Oscar. The dynamic is weird because he gets protective of her like a boyfriend or significant other would. And
did she like chews on his ear and like licks his ear? And they act like boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah,
there are times when she like is trying to make out with him and he's like, nah. But then later it's like he wants to.
I'm going to chalk it up to French culture.
Okay. Okay, Alex is writing that one off.
Yeah, that one's
just fucking French. Oh, the sister, choose your ear. You have the baguettes.
Exactly.
It's my French accent, by the way. It's as good as my other accents. Oui, baguettes.
But, yeah, she's the most human element for me in the film. She's like the one that represents the most relatable sense of trauma, because while Oscar is the main character and you are forced to see his point of view, I don't relate to getting shot up into a bathroom after failing to flush my drugs down the toilet, right?
Right.
But I do relate to like a life of like bitterness, poverty. Not because I've experienced these things myself. That's not what I mean, but relating.
You're an empathetic human.
Exactly. So I can make connections personally more to her character than I can with most of the other ones. She's really important though. I mean, she's a prostitute, right? Or
she's a strip dancer. She's banging the club guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if he owns it or what. Not sure. Doesn't matter.
There's a little like love dynamic between her and the Alex character.
Yeah, we see that pay off at the end.
I mean, his character kind of goes off the deep end as well. Like after the drug bust and everything, it kind of like breaks apart their little social circle, and he's like living like in destitution.
Before we jump over to him, I want to linger on her for a minute longer. I think like, and I agree that she's like the relatable core, although I do really like the Alex character as well. But you see her, there's this element of hope that the movie starts with, right? Or rather that the flashback starts with, where he's been trying to get money to bring her to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a dream come true. They've been separated for so long, and they have this deep connection because they were fostered and went through this horrific trauma together. And she gets there, and then it's all downhill from there to the point where she's stripping. Her brother dies. She gets pregnant from the one guy, has an abortion. This, by the way, this moment, I want to say, this is around where I was like, I thought maybe the second half of this movie would be different. I thought it was going to be him looking at other lives he could have. I thought it would get way more abstract than it did, in a sense. But then I thought, when she got pregnant the first time, I was like, with these two having the weird sexual dynamic that they do, the weirdest, most brilliant thing this movie could do, in my opinion, is have him choose to be rebirthed as his sister's son. And I was like so happy. I was so happy at the end that that's where Gaspar Noé went with it. I was so happy. But then it's like, is that what happens though? Because, okay, this is gonna get weird.
Okay,
all right?
yeah.
I'm gonna attempt. I will attempt to, I don't know, I don't even know the word to use.
Distill.
So one of the things when he's alive is he's over at Alex's apartment, and he's looking at this model, this insane city model that Alex's roommate has made. That's like a neon version of Tokyo, including this iconic image of the Love Hotel, which is like, I guess, where everyone goes to have sex. And he says, well, can you just imagine this when it's like all your friends are inside just fucking, and everyone's having a great time? And then at the very end of the movie, like 2 hours later, you're going through Tokyo in this wild, like cinematic way, except it's not Tokyo. It's the streets and buildings of this diorama, this psychedelic diorama that the roommate has constructed. And then you go up, it pans up to the Love Hotel, and then you see all the different characters that you've seen throughout the movie engaged in different, highly explicit sexual acts. One of them, the final one, is Alex and his sister banging. And this is where you get the penis cam, or I guess it's a vagina cam. You see literally like the camera's inside of a vagina, and you see the head of the penis thrusting in.
Yes.
And she's saying, come inside, come inside. And my mind is exploding at this moment, at this time, because it's like it's a double meaning, right?
Yeah.
She's saying, come inside to Alex, like literally jizz inside my body, give me that pancake man batter. But she's also saying, come inside to the soul of her brother that is like entering her, watching. Yeah. But then you're like, is it real? Because the fact that it is this manifestation of something he said earlier in the film regarding all the people banging inside the Love Hotel, is that just to bring it back, is that like what Alex was saying about the Book of the Dead, right? Where you will manifest like things that your brain just comes up with or your soul comes up with. Do you understand what I hope this is at least mildly clear, because it is very complicated.
Oh, yes. So my theory is that at that point, all the way up until that point, until we see Oscar being born after the fertilization of the like egg of the ovum, we see him being like born to his mother. However, that isn't his mother. I feel like in reality, he has been incarnated and he has finally transcended after experiencing a glut of trauma and past experience and things like that. And I feel like that's what the film was trying to do and distill down in, the 3 hours that it was.
Yeah. So you're saying that he was birthed by his sister. He's reincarnated.
All the way up until that point, it's just his memories playing back for him. And like you said, like a false reality filling in kind of until boom, then he's reincarnated and then the film ends. Because at that point, you're a totally new being. You see, when you're a soul, you still are living as part of the past being, right? But in this idea of reincarnation, it's like the minute that physical manifestation of a new conscience enters the world, you are like sucked out and you are a new person with new memories.
And then it says the end.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with you about the end. I think it has that hopeful note, because otherwise it's like, what's the point? What was the point of all this?
Yeah, I don't think it's just like like an artsy snuff film, right? Like, I don't think he was trying to set out to just be like, ooh, let's show someone die on screen.
No, I think almost everyone will have the reading that we have, where he is reincarnated. But I think it gets the movie plays an interesting trick on you, or at least it does on me, because it's fairly realistic and grounded in terms of like what he's experiencing as a soul, if that's a statement I can make. Where you go to these scenes and you're like, okay, this is the sister dealing with the trauma. This is Alex, who, the police are looking for him for drug bust reasons.
Yeah.
And he's living on the street. And then the moment it turns is where you're all of a sudden in the back seat of the cab, and she's like, that thing back there is not my brother. And I was like, whoa, what the hell is going on? And then you see him as like a zombie version of himself, kind of.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, wait a minute, I'm like losing the plot here. And if I were on real drugs right now, this would be fucking wild. But then I was like, oh, my brain snapped back to that earlier moment where the ideas of the movie were put forth to me by Alex, right? He's like, and your brain will start manifesting things, or your soul will start manifesting things through fears, Yeah. And then there are a few moments like that. Like he walks over and visits Alex in the alleyway, and he's like, they burned you, man. And so you're in psychedelic territory at that point. You're like, okay, we're off the deep end now.
Yeah. So I had a question written down for you.
Yeah.
And I like the way that this kind of dovetails what you were just saying into this question. But do you think that, as artsy and avant-garde as this film is, do you think that it's like captivating or compelling in a way that could do you think like the general moviegoer could watch this film and not say it's necessarily good, but I don't know, not hate it?
No.
Okay. You think it's really out there?
I think it's not super out there for me. It's really great and interesting, and pretty mind-bending sometimes. It's not like, it doesn't break your brain like the Holy Mountain does or something, where it's like the visual weirdness gets so redonkadonk that you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
It's very followable up until maybe the end, but as long as you like have some grounding in terms of the thematics at work. I think it's fairly like it's not an obtuse movie. It's really not. It's touching on a lot of different things and not saying explicit things about them. It's more just exploring a life and a death and drug use and sexuality. But that's like, I don't know. That's fine. That doesn't mean it's obtuse, but it's, I think for a general audience, they'll say this movie was slow and kind of pointless and like kind of tasteless.
Yeah.
Apropos like sex.
That's true. I feel like, so when I want to go back to the idea of like just the shock value of people like Von Trier and Noah and things like that. So I always think of Eggers. His movies are disturbing and they are shocking, but he is much more subdued visually and much more tied to like a solid and traditional narrative in his films.
Yeah.
But they're disturbing. And there's like a level of shock there, right? So it's interesting because I don't want to cheapen what Noah has done by just calling him like a shock artist. But personally, if you're going to shock me, my own personal taste, I like the way that Eggers goes about it. It's a much more subtle presentation. Whereas I can see the Enter the Void, and I can see why, okay, yeah, obviously this movie's going to be like fucking visually insane, and it's going to be shocking. And when you pair that with shocking themes of sex and drugs and death, it all kind of muddles for me, and that's like my biggest criticism of his film. Whereas something like The Lighthouse or The Witch, when it does its thing, it's really strong and it's really potent because of the way that Eggers has set up the stories. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
so
not
I
horror.
think
I'm not saying no is horror. It just fits
this is
into
not
this.
horror. This is not a horror film.
Yeah.
At all, I don't think.
No.
Maybe a tiny bit, but not like High Life was more of a horror film.
Yeah.
It had more of that feel to it.
That's sci-fi. Yeah.
It just had something to it where it's like it was a little more horrifying. The explicitness was just a little bit more explicit. This movie, I didn't feel like it trying to be a shock jock kind of movie. I really didn't, other than like sex. But it's like I was like, whatever. This is a movie that's not rated by a French director or Argentinian director. It's like, yeah, there's gonna be some sex in it. Whatever. Like that doesn't bother me. Sex in movies that's fine. That's whatever. It's like, I'm not massively uncomfortable during sex scenes in films, especially when they're like this is not a Hollywood production. It's not like the romance music plays. This is like, and this is where I will draw a comparison to High Life, is that it's really just like raw and animal. It's just like, it's like really not glorifying sex. It's just showing sex as it would happen if you fucking walked into a room and people were banging.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, it's not glamorous. There's not that music playing and like your hair is like perfectly lit.
Exactly, right.
By a Hollywood cinematographer. It's just like, yeah. And I think that's the interesting, or one of the most interesting parts of this film, is it is very dreamlike and abstract in a sense, but it also feels very real at times. Like these are just real moments that would happen to real people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not glorifying any of it. It's just interested in showing it and interested in thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, it's so cool because it's like, it's not mundane. Obviously, the death and the shooting of someone in a bathroom is not, mundane. But the film isn't about like this crazy drug chase with Interpol spanning 4 or 5 countries all across Europe, and they finally find this kid in a bathroom.
No, this is not Jack Ryan or something.
Exactly. So there's something to be said about films like that, and I think that Noah has like, I don't know, I think it's necessary. As someone who loves to watch movies, it's something that you got to step out of every once in a while, and you just got to experience a film like this. It'll help you contextualize the more traditional ones too.
Yeah, and it'll also be more interesting than a lot of those because you don't see things like it a lot. That's like one of the things I said about High Life is like it's hard to say it's enjoyable to watch while you're watching it. It's not like the way that you would process Gone in 60 Seconds. You're like, fuck yeah, this cheeseburger is tasty, you know? It's more like at the end of it, you're like, holy shit, that was unusual and interesting.
Yeah.
And like that's always gonna, I don't know, I'm not gonna say always gonna trump traditional narratives. I fucking love some traditional narratives, a ton of them actually. But yeah, I don't know. I as I get older, I'm definitely more interested in watching movies like this, for sure. Like, give me left of center, like, give me just weird me out. Like, make me feel things I haven't felt before using the language of cinema. You know, this was a unique film. I'm glad I watched it. I'm gonna watch his other movies. I'm really not looking forward to that 12-minute rape scene in that one movie. I already watched The Last Duel this year. I don't need another one.
Wait, I haven't seen that. I didn't see The Last Duel. You and Jeff.
I mean, a lot of people enjoyed it. I did not.
I know the plot. So I know, like, but do they show that?
Without going into spoilers in case the audience has not watched it and want to, there is a rape and you see it happen twice. And the second time is like even longer. And you're like, okay,
great.
Really don't need to see this.
A lot, Ridley Scott. Great.
You know, I get it. I get that rape is a tool. It depends how you use it, because it can set up like character dynamics or like a revenge narrative kind of thing, or even just like comment on the general degradation of humans to other humans. There's a lot of ways you can do that, and rape can be very effective in doing that. It can also be cheap and easy way to manipulate the audience, and it's really I don't know, it's really subjective, right? It's dangerous.
Then you get into an area where it can just get real like trashy really quickly.
Like Death Wish, you know, like Death Wish 5. When you're getting into like Death Wish 5 territory or whatever, all those movies are like Charles Bronson's girl gets raped and then he murders people with giant pistols.
Yeah. Charles Bronson, what a man. Man's man.
Man's man. You know what I recently watched that I didn't even realize he was in it because I hadn't watched it in so long was The Great Escape.
I was about to say, that's one of my favorite movies, and he's in it.
I love The Great Escape.
Away.
It's so good. If we did A Great Escape, would we do all three of us?
Oh, fuck yeah. Because the movie's fun, dude. I whistle. Whenever I clean, like, my house, I'll whistle the theme to that movie. God, I fucking love that movie. Dracula.
The Cooler King.
Yeah.
Good old, what's his name? I forgot. Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen. Richard Attenborough's in that, I think.
Richard Attenborough. Dude, for the longest time, I thought he directed it. He did not direct it. I've given people the wrong information for most of my life about it. Yeah.
I have no idea who did, but that movie is full of people. Steve McQueen. James Garner's in that movie. Donald Pleasance is in
Donald
that movie.
Pleasance? He plays the nebbish little scientist guy?
He ends up going blind, yeah.
Yeah.
God,
we'll have to do Great Escape at some point. We'll have to do... I know what I decided as well. I can spoil this for you because Jeff won't get to the end of this episode. He won't listen to this. But I've decided that he needs Antichrist in his cinematic lexicon.
Oh, shit.
So one of my choices is going to be Antichrist coming up. Maybe the next one.
I'll get in on a menage a trois for that one.
Yeah.
Charlotte Gainsborough and Willem Dafoe.
Oh, all right. Let's end this one up. Let's wrap it up.
All right.
Any last thoughts about Enter the Void?
No. Let's exit the void.
Let's exit the void. We've been two solid weeks. Sex and death at the edge of the void. Well, maybe it'll be a third time. I don't know. I don't know what we're doing next, just you and me, but we'll figure it out. Thank you all for listening. Reel Weirdos. We shall return, and we'll see you next time. Now our podcast is done, and we have to run. We know it is sad, but we had so much fun. Don't be bereft, Jesse, Alex, and Jeff. We'll be back real soon. The Reel Weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long. Bo 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 bo.